Hey, Trailblazers, we have some exciting news here at the Trailblazing Texas podcast. We have partnered up with Hilltop Packs, not just because they make amazing ultralight gear, but because they're a small family run business doing huge things for our hiking and backpacking community. Every food bag, dry sack, fanny pack that you order can be completely customized. Print your trail name, your dog's face, your favorite mountain, or really whatever inspires you. When you shop at Hilltop Packs, you're not only buying gear that you're absolutely going to love, but you're supporting real families, real jobs, and small town craftsmanship. So head over to hilltoppacks.com and use code TTP10 to get 10% off of your order. Now on with the episode. Welcome to the Trailblazing Texas podcast, where we embark on a journey through our diverse Texas landscapes and breathtaking trails while always engaging with our amazing Texas hiking community. So settle in, tighten up those bootlaces, and get ready for the thrilling tales awaiting for you on this episode. Welcome to the Trailblazing Texas podcast. I'm your host, Jason, and I've got to say, today's episode, these types of episodes mean the absolute most to me. As a father of a young woman, I think a lot about what influences her in her life, what shapes her confidence and her belief in herself. And conversations like this, where she can hear from women who are truly examples of living life, pushing beyond their comforts, and showing strength, are exactly the kind of episodes that I want her to hear and that I want to be a part of and send out in the podcast universe. So with that being said, Kathy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jason.
All right. You are currently in the Pacific Northwest, but you reside, I think, on the East Coast, right?
That's correct. I live in Western Maryland, it's a little town called Williamsport, Maryland. It sits on the Potomac River, and it's also close to the midway point of the C&O, the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal, which is a national park. It runs from Georgetown to Cumberland, Maryland, so it's quite a large park.
All right. So to the listeners, please just, let's say this was an interview and I was hiring you for a hiker, lead hiker. Can you just give us a quick rundown of all the hiking, backpacking that you've done? Just the big stuff, like the
Okay, I would say the big stuff would be, I hiked sections of the Florida Trail. That's sort of like your winter, like a good thing to do in the winter because I wouldn't go to Florida to hike any other time. So I've done 3 sections of the Florida Trail, including the Ocean to Lake Trail, which is Lake Okeechobee to Hope Sound. I backpacked across Iceland. In 2014, I did one of the high routes in Italy, which was hut to hut. So, you don't carry quite the same amount of gear you did. Like when Iceland was unsupported for 3 weeks, which was basically everything I needed for 3 weeks was on my back when I started. The Italy trip was hut to hut. So I just had what I needed to get there. But you had a bed and there was food there, which was really pretty cushy. Not my typical, that's not typically what I like to do. I hiked the high route of Yosemite and the Wonderland Trail, which circumnavigates Mount Rainier. I've also done the Lewitt Trail around Mount St. Helens and the Timberline Trail, which goes around Mount Hood in Oregon. I'm trying to think.
wow.
There's a lot of other backpacking trips in the Pacific Northwest I've done. Mostly with my daughter as the lead. The last one I've done most recently was the Centennial Trail, which runs through South Dakota from Custer State Park up to Bear Butte.
Nice. And to the listeners, when she says daughter, she is the mother of Anastasia. You've listened to the episodes that I had with Anastasia and all her experience of mountaineering and stuff, but your other daughter is like some kind of ultra runner. She showed a picture on Instagram, like she posted of her toes. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. She was just with me out on the East Coast. I was her support person for running the JFK, and she finished in one of the top 10 women finishers, and it was pretty record-breaking year for the in case none of the listeners know, the JFK is the oldest ultra marathon in the United States. It's actually the first ultra and the oldest, and, every year it's partially run on the Appalachian Trail, and then it drops down onto the C&O Canal and finishes in my hometown of Williamsport. And that's how my daughter she ran it at 19 for the first time, and she came back 20 something years later and ran it again and, finished in, under it was like under 8 hours. So it was a sort of a crazy time.
Golly.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy for 50 miles.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to the listeners, Kathy is Anastasia's mother. And during the episode with Anastasia, she was saying that you get out more in the outdoors than she does. And so I thought that's what really triggered me to have you on. And, I kind of saw that you had liked some of the videos that we posted. And then, man, to see your Instagram and all the cool things, I was like, "Yep, please, Anastasia, can you tell your mom? Could she please come on the podcast?"
Well, and the interesting thing is that I really have her to thank. While we did lots of camping, when they were children, I had never backpacked, and this is where for people who are hesitant once they get older to try something new, I was 52, my very first backpack. Up to that point, I had only car camp. And granted, I had done extended car camping for 6 weeks, at a time with my 3 daughters. But, to go from that to that's a big difference between camping and backpacking.
Yeah.
So but it was her. She's the one who decided, "I think you're gonna really like this." And then up we went.
All right, so if I kind of wanted to break this first part into kind of like how it all began with you, whether it's hiking, backpacking, the love of the outdoors, and then now what that means to you and what that looks like for you now. I'm 53, and so I've actually started looking at kind of like how I used to do it, and now with I'm getting older, so what that kind of means and looks like for me. So I'd kind of like to talk about that with you. But just to kind of step back, how did hiking and backpacking first enter your life?
I did not grow up in an outdoorsy family at all. Military, spent my entire growing up, 19 schools before high school, primarily living in Kansas, Oklahoma, but was born in California, but bouncing from base to base. And then during Vietnam, ended up on the island of Guam and lived 3 years on Guam while my dad flew B-52s. So, and granted, we did spend, as kids, back in the day, you'd get up, your mother would just my mom would just kick us out of the house, pretty much, "Get dressed, get out, come back when it's time to eat." So,
Yep.
I was always outdoors, but, there wasn't sort of an outdoorsy kind of vibe going on then. I think it wasn't until I became a mother and sort of was struggling with, like, what to do with that because I had just been in academia, going to college, I was teaching, and then all of a sudden I was, a parent, and I really was sort of floundering with, like, what do you do with this kid? And I felt like it was easier to sort of put him in a backpack and go somewhere and walk and do things and show them things in the outdoors. That became really a connection for me. And as I had my second daughter and my third daughter, I just felt like they were happier when they were outside. And when they were happier, I was happier. So it just morphed into that's just what we did, that we became very much an outdoor focused family. and not, and I just learned, like, as we went along, and I remember being in Pennsylvania thinking, I just had this idea that we had to start camping. That was the first thing, that we're gonna start car camping, and actually, we rented a tent from the Navy base and near where we lived in Pennsylvania, and packed the car up, drove up to Ricketts Glen State Park, and unfortunately, it was gonna be pouring rain, pulled the tent out, and there was no tarp. So, our first
Oh,
camping adventure was to have a tent full of water and basically floating, and we all slept in the car. And
oh my
I
gosh.
thought, "Oh, man, this is terrible. Nobody's gonna wanna do it again." And my girls, all they could talk about was that that was the best trip of their life. They
Oh,
had
really?
such a good time, and I was like, "Okay, that's it. This is what we're gonna do." So, pretty much from that point on, and I think they were maybe 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, like, they were young. I mean, they were small, but they just felt like they just loved it. You get to a campsite and just let them loose, and they would be, like, happy playing in the creeks or whatever. So, that was the beginning, was the car camping, and then when we lived in Pennsylvania, I made the decision to begin homeschooling my children and had the opportunity to have a 6-week period of time. You don't have the constraints of school,
Right.
and basically, I mapped out this trek that now that we had, sort of been camping, that we would pack the van and spend 6 weeks living in a tent and visit national parks and sort of let rangers teach my kids all summer through, ranger-led hikes and junior ranger programs. And we visited 12 national parks in 6 weeks. They became junior rangers in all of those parks, and none of them at 6 weeks wanted to come home. So, I think it was a success. It wasn't all glory, but for the most part, it really changed all of our lives, I think.
So was there a specific trip that maybe that you just mentioned it with the flooding of the tent, but a specific trip where, you kinda just sat back and go, "This is something that I want to do."
There is one. We made a trip camping up to Baxter State Park, which is in Maine, which is the terminus of the Appalachian Trail,
Yeah.
and we were camping there and happened to be the timing was there was a hurricane, I think it was in the '90s, that came through, basically completely flooded the park. We were in a, like, we had a moat dug around our tent, but we also sat at this picnic table playing cards until 10 o'clock at night, just having such a good time and so many good hikes that we took in the park, that I remember specifically thinking, "This is what I wanna do with my girls. This is what I wanna give them." And that was prior to our 6-week trip. That was sort of setting the stage for knowing I wanted to spend more time outside with my kids. And also there was a time in Pennsylvania where we began volunteering, at a national park. It's called, Hopewell Furnace National Historic Site, and all of my girls became volunteers there, and they were the first children ever to not have a parent. I volunteered helping the art historian, but I didn't do, living history, and all the girls did living history while I sat in a cushy office looking at pictures. But
Wow.
they all my da actually, Anastasia volunteered there all through college.
Mm.
It was over 10 years of they all became, like, volunteer of the year awards, and she wrote the junior ranger program for that park. So it was
What?
yeah, one of the years she was
Wow.
there, the park ranger said, "Hey, as a project, would you like to design the junior ranger program?" And so she did that, and we were really close to all of the rangers there, very close. Every time I go back to Pennsylvania, I drive by the park just to say hi. All different rangers,
Oh,
but
yeah. Wow. So, looking back, the bond that you build with your girls and getting them outdoors, was there a hike or, like, yeah, maybe let's just talk about hiking. Like, there was a specific hike that really meant a lot to you?
there I always think there's one, and I think it's in the White Mountains, and it was up to we stopped at, like, the Appalachian Club. There's a place they can make recommendations, and we went up to a summit that was called Glenn's Boulder, and my middle daughter, Mare, who also works for Kula, she was not the happy hiker. She never was the happy hiker. She was the one who, like, threw herself on the trail and, said she was going to die, and
Mhm. I have 4 of those.
yeah. It was pretty funny. But I that hike, when we got to the top, I would say that was one of them, and the other one is in, Acadia National Park. When we climbed the Beehive, which, if you've ever know Acadia National Park, these are sort of iconic hikes in the park because you have to use, like, rungs to get up the rocks, and the girls, just by the time we got to the top and you get these sweeping views of the ocean and sort of the island you're on, they were just beaming, and I think that stands out as a parent, that particular hike really stands out for when they were little and for doing, like, day hikes, and then we'd go back to our campsite afterwards.
So, I use the quads with my kids, and I told them when they turn 16, "We're not gonna have some fancy party to celebrate you. I'm gonna buy you a tent and a backpack. You're gonna check the weather, you're gonna pack your clothes, you're gonna pack your food, and then I'm gonna take you to the quads, and I'm gonna hike the crap out of you, and we're gonna do the highest peak in Texas." And it was for me, like, kind of like coming to, you're kinda coming into your own, you're becoming
Mhm.
an adult, and I wanted to kinda show them that as hard as life is, as a parent, I'll always be here to support you. I'm not gonna always fix your issues, but I'll be there to support you, and also that you can get through difficult times. And, so, yeah, each one of my children, I've taken up to Guadalupe Peak. Any friends that have lost loved ones or going through the pits of life, I take them to the quads. And, yeah, so it's funny how once about, you get into hiking a backpack and you understand the power that it has, how you use that at times for yourself or to help people, or you have these moments that you kind of just look back on. And like for me, there's moments with my hiking pals that I get teary eyed just thinking like what we went through together, the dangers, the pushing through, and it's absolutely spectacular. So yeah, I love that. So let's say back then when y'all are car camping and you're doing your hiking, you're hitting the national parks. Did you imagine that this would always be a part of your life?
I don't think I did. I think, at the moment, I think we were trying to, it's just I think camping and getting away from your everyday life was really important for me because I felt like when I was at home and all those everything that entails, whether it's schooling or lessons or whatever, you're so busy, that was hard to, like, really focus on just, like, relationships or nature or the perfection and the imperfection of nature and how we are like that, perfect and imperfect, and I think that's what nature does for you. That's why it always, like, seems to give me something no matter when I go out, whether it's raining or cold or overly hot and I'm miserable. Getting through it just feels like this is where I belong.
Yeah.
It always comes down to that for me. Like, I just feel like I'm more comfortable, I'm more relaxed. But it's always interesting, when I first started backpacking, every time I go on a backpacking trip, I feel that, like, tightness, like, nervousness, like, "Oh gosh," like, because you don't know what it's gonna be like, and soon as I'm out of the car and I'm away from the car, it's just like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
okay, I can do this. I'm not turning around, I'm not going back." Although there have been some trips where we've had to bail, but
So this is kind of off the just a side question. Do you have a hard time bailing? Like for me, my ego gets in the way
Mhm.
and it clouds my judgment. And my friend who lives up there where you're at, he lives in Napa Vine, and I'm pushing and complaining about we're not reaching the or the people that are with, we're not reaching the destination. I want to get this accomplished. There's some times where I probably should have turned around and I didn't, and, he just goes, "How much fun would it be if you were always successful?" And I'm like, "Okay, John, you're always right." Like,
Mhm.
it's and so he taught me that for me, success and enjoyment is the moment I put my or maybe even before that, you start preparing for a trip. And I don't know if you can see behind me, I've got tons of gear. So you're pulling out gear, or the moment that you get to the trailhead, to me is a success, or the moment you step on the trail or the ridge, so it really has changed the way I kind of think about some of the things that I do. But what about you? Like, did are you still like your ego kind of pushes you maybe a little too far, or are you come to terms with it?
I haven't been in that many I mean, well, just for one example, like, when I did this Centennial Trail, day 1, it was 112 degrees, and, the woman I was
Golly.
doing it with was coming from Oregon. They had driven across country to pick me up in Rapid City, at the airport, and then we had a day to sort of, like, regroup, get our stuff together, and, get on the trail. And, and we had umbrellas, we knew it was gonna be hot, but there's just some level that you didn't quite understand what 112 degrees with no shade felt like in South Dakota, and we had to hike a lot further than we had the mileage, but we thought there was gonna be a nice campsite, and it turned out it looked like it was a terrible place, and there was a horse camp there, but they had told us you can camp there, but, and my friend basically collapsed on the road, and I thought,
Oh, no.
"Oh my god, what am I gonna do?" And there was like a camp host at this horse farm. It was it's like a horse camp, and I ran up to her, and it just so happened her name was Kathleen, and I said, "Oh, that's funny, my name's Kathleen." And she goes, "Are you hiking this trail?" And I told her yes, and I said, "And my friend is just really not feeling well." She goes, and there was a creek there and some really beautiful shady spots. She goes, "I love you hikers. You go right down there by the water and pitch your tents and camp right here, and you can use our showers."
Oh,
So
nice.
it was amazing because I really thought we had to go hike up into this natural area and find a terrible campsite. But that first day, I thought, what? And I planned the whole trip. So there's a lot of responsibility, which I appreciate my daughter so much more now because she had always planned them. But this hike of the Centennial Trail, I had planned the whole thing. So I felt super responsible for Anne's well-being, um, and she just was just completely wiped out. So, luckily, this woman saw the situation. I think she would have let us stay there anyway, even if Anne hadn't collapsed on the road. But soon as I told her, "Hey, we can camp in the shade, it's gonna be wonderful," she perked up and she looked better. But I that moment, I thought, "Oh my gosh, should we gonna have to bail? Are we not gonna make it?" But we did after that, it was perfect. I mean, we got used to the heat, a day or 2 of, the umbrellas made a big difference, though.
So this is almost like tradition, this next question. So, with Anastasia, she talked about, her first one of her first backpacking trips and how she felt and, stealing toilet paper and all that kind of stuff. So, if you look back at your first real official backpacking trip, what emotions did you have leading up to that?
I was terrified.
Yeah.
I was terrified. Anastasia planned it. Um, the backpack I was wearing was huge. I'm a fairly small person, and the backpack was almost half my size, and it was not what you would call ultralight. I don't think we had ultralight equipment. I certainly have it now, but
Mhm.
it was a very large backpack, and she had decided that she was going to take me into an area of Washington State called the Alpine Lakes Wilderness and do in the enchantments. And we went in October, and you have to climb up over something called Ascar Pass, which is basically this rock scree straight up. I mean, the grade of I wouldn't call it a trail. It's really like boulders, and the grade is so steep, and I kept feeling like I was gonna tip over with my backpack. So I until we got to the top, I would say, terrified, and then once we once we got up to the top and I'm looking out over this expanse of just unbelievable beauty, I thought I just it just blew me away, and I knew at that moment that this was something I was gonna do for as long as I could. And my daughter was convinced I would never do it again. She's like, "Oh my god, she's not gonna do it again. It's just so scary."
That was your first trip?
First trip. You should ask her about that because she tells everyone, "Don't ever do this, and especially not with your mother."
And when you got to the top, did you look at her and go, "What have I done to you in my life for you to put me through
Well,
this?"
this happens on almost every backpacking trip. There's some moment of just such intense beauty that we both cry, and that
Yeah.
was one of those moments, and that's when I knew, like, I wanna feel this again, and I will say I do on occasion backpack alone, but to share it with someone else, um, that's pretty special.
Especially someone you care about.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. No, I
Right.
feel you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. I love it.
We're definitely both, criers in the wilderness. Those are one of the sure 100% I can guarantee you if I'm gonna get emotional, it is gonna be standing in front of an alpine lake or a desert or like a prairie with a bison coming toward me. I will burst into tears because 'cause I'm just like, I can't believe I'm this lucky. I That's how I feel.
Oh, let me tell you, you talk about tears, crying. I don't know that there's been an episode where I haven't. And also, like, this is a really long story, I'll shorten it, but there's a little bitty restaurant in Van Horn, Texas. I got to know the owners. They had to close. Mr. Espinosa, the grandfather, passed away. They were able to reopen it, and I always go when I go to the Guads, I visit the restaurant and eat there because it's the best food. It's like, a few tables, and it's just awesome. It's just absolutely awesome. And so when I went back, I walked in and, the grandmother, Miss Espinosa, who I knew really her husband more, but, did talk to her, she just kinda looked at me like, like, "Ah, you look kinda familiar." And while I always took a picture with them, and so I showed her the picture, she starts crying, I'm crying,
Mm.
and then her daughter and her, son-in-law had opened the restaurant back, and so, we all came out, took a picture, and I went back to the table, and my friend Henning, who I usually hike with on big adventures, he just looks at me and goes, Jason," he goes, "You cry a lot." And, and he's a man of very few words, and, that was he goes, "You cry a lot." So, yeah, no, I feel you. I'm right there with you, and, absolutely, and even in the Guads, I've said it 1,000 times, there's not a trip that I go there that I don't cry, either because she broke me, the Guads,
Mhm.
she stuck thorns through me, just is this gonna be the last time that I get to see her? So it's, yeah, I totally understand. So if you look back at, let's say right now, all the backpacking trips and hiking stuff that you've done, what is one thing that you feel that you've learned the hard way?
I would say, like, it's the perseverance it takes to get through, like, a really hard day is always worth it. Um, I and plan there's some mistakes. You always make mistakes when you backpack, and I think you learn. You can just you can learn from that. Not maybe not having enough water, whatever it is. But I always make a note of like remembering this stuff, learning from this, trying not to, like make these same mistakes again, but being a little kinder to myself, maybe that I wasn't for many, many years, and forgive myself for like stupid stuff you do, which,
Yeah.
you just do stuff that's like, "Oh my gosh, how did I forget this thing?" But the overall, I mean, like, you do get into a rhythm when you're backpacking that especially after the first night, you sort of get your groove, and then it's easier. And actually, the more I'm out, the more days I'm out, the more I don't wanna come back. I backpacked with people that, like, were out for 8 or 9 days, and they're like, "I can't wait to get back," and I'm like, "I just wanna do it again." I just get to the end of the trail and start it all over again. That's I'm just like that. Like, if it's a two-nighter, I usually don't get that feeling, but the more I'm out, the more I wanna stay out.
Yeah. Nice. So I lead hikes with the Lone Star Hiking Trail
Mhm.
Club. I'm just right down maybe about 30 minutes from Trailhead, one of the longest trail in Texas, the Lone Star Hiking Trail. It's 96.4 miles, and then if you did the loops, it's 128 miles. And so we do the second and fourth Saturdays of the month, we do section hikes and people sign up. And what's amazing to me, and it's so cool, is that we have a lot of women that come out and go on these hikes. And to hear the stories of them that said, I was gonna click register so many times and I just talked myself out of it. I'm so happy that I finally clicked the button to register, which kind of, I think, like maybe mentally just put them like, yeah, I can't turn back now. So, with that being said, what advice would you give someone considering their first hike or backpacking trip?
I've worked with, like, I have a friend currently that was a New York City musician her whole career, and, I used to hike with a group. Before COVID, I there was a group called the Mountain Club of Maryland that I began hiking with. I had been out in Washington for a while working in Olympic, doing, like, backcountry, like, just checking permits and, very low key, but, when I came back, was by myself. I do most of my hiking now by myself or with, like, one other person, but I did join a club, and, I met some really wonderful people that I did a lot of backpacking with, and this one particular woman who I was just in Arizona with, um, came to me and said, "Somebody just told me you like to backpack, and I just retired from, 25 years in New York City as a French horn player. I'm selling my horn, and I'm buying backpacking gear, and I've never backpacked." And she said, "Are you interested?" And I'm like, "Hey, that sounds good." So we she's a sort of a nervy person, so, like, she's got guts, but, I do know people that, like, you'll mention that you like to backpack and they'll have an interest, but they're very reluctant to do something new that they feel will be, too difficult. And, we're just living in a time when there's so much really great gear and, very lightweight gear that makes it
Yeah.
much more, like something you can do as you get older. I have no plan of stopping and, and hopefully into my 90s. And that's just what I'm shooting for right now. But, my friend was in her, like, 60 when she began backpacking for the first time. She's now 65, and I've taken her. She actually went on an Andrew Skurka-led hike last year to learn more, like, navigating skills, but I've taken her on 5 different backpacking trips, and, and she just learns a little each time she goes, and she takes classes, like the online classes that Kula,
Mhm.
provides are really helpful for if you're interested in backpacking. Those are really helpful, but, it is hard to reach out. And especially as you get older, to reach out to try something new, it can feel very intimidating. Um,
Right.
even reaching out to hike with a group felt intimidating to me because I'm not the most outgoing person. So that first phone call I made to go on a hike, and the guy sort of grilled me because he wasn't sure I was physically able to do it. And I said, "Well, I just ran an ultra marathon." He's like, "Oh, okay. Well, you can come." Because it was like a they were doing, it's called the Hike Across Maryland, and it's basically the entire length of the Appalachian Trail in Maryland down to Harper's Ferry. So it's 42 miles.
Wow.
But we were doing half of it in one day, and that was my first hike I signed up for. And he kept saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure you can do this?" And I was like, "I think I can." But yeah, I mean, and some people are just a lot of women in particular feel more comfortable, like, having other women or men to hike with, and I completely get that.
Yeah.
I'm really comfortable alone. I don't I'm just not smart enough to have a whole lot of fear. That's what I always say. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to be scared.
So does Anastasia bug you a lot? Like, "Mom, where are you? I need your itinerary."
Yeah, she always tells me, "Okay, before you go out, leave a float plan. Tell somebody where you're going." And I do even for day hikes, I carry a Garmin. I have like one of the minis,
Right.
and I keep that. And you know what, Jason? I have used it not for myself, but I have used it twice. Once at Mount Rainier on the Wonderland Trail for somebody else who was in trouble,
Oh,
and
no.
another time, I can't remember what trail it was, the Timberline Trail, and a girl who thought she would have cell service, who needed to contact her family, did not have it, and I was able to message her family that she was okay, and that she was planning on coming out at a certain trailhead. And my daughter has always said that to me, "Even if you don't think you're gonna need it, bring it." And it's just like, carrying your emergency kit. Um, this past summer, I was in Sisters, Oregon, and hiking on a trail that, by all accounts, was just sort of a hike to some waterfalls. It was like maybe 5 miles to the waterfalls. And we ended up meeting two elderly gentlemen. I mean, and by elderly, I mean they were both in their mid 80s, had hiked out the trail. One fell and he was unconscious, and the other one passed out from low blood sugar. They had nothing with them. They had no water, they had no emergency kit, and they had no communication. So they were really lucky that they ran into the four of us because we had it all. So
Yeah.
we called for emergency backup, and the search and rescue was incredible. They were in within a couple of hours, came in and rescued the two men and took them out. But I think that's like an important, just something simple like that can make a huge difference.
Yeah. There's a I think she's horribly famous, and, I don't care about actors and sports stuff, but Longmire Author, I met him when I was in hog heaven, and there was a ranger at the Guads named Pam. She's in her 70s. I always talk to her about, mountain lion sightings because I wanna see a mountain lion in the Guads, and so I would always, "Hey, Ranger Pam," mountain lions, and I think she'd always remember me because of my tree tattoos. And so she's like, "Hey," and so we would talk, and she was always involved in the rescues. So
Mhm.
she would tell me about the fatalities and stuff, and you would really get the story of kind of not that's in the article and stuff, like the real story. Not that just more detail.
Right.
And, so we're talking one time and she's just a volunteer at our national park. And so I'm like, "Hey, Pam, blah, blah, blah." We're talking and she starts telling me about a rescue and I'm like, "That sounds like, that there was a movie." And she grabbed her name badge and she moved it, and it's Pam Bells. So she, in the Whites up in that area, she was at our national park for, not maybe 5 or 6 years, and so I took an Ussie with her because I was so excited, and I posted that on the Guadalupe, Mountain, like, Facebook page and even the local one, and to see the amount of people in comments that just said, "Oh my god, I broke my leg, I broke my ankle, or I ran out of water, and this and that," and how, she helped people. Anyway, so, just listening to your stories, you remind me of her, and I'll text her now just to like once a month. I'll text her and like, hey, how's it going? What's going on? She's out in the middle of nowhere in Colorado or wherever, and she just has like a little foam pad, a mummy bag, and a backpack, and just kind of like you, just let's do this. And so yeah, so little sidetrack, just listening to your stories and stuff. I'm like, you're like her sister. So I really like this question. And if you kind of look back, and maybe it's not that many years because, you recently got into backpacking, but, as we get older,
Mhm.
how has your approach to backpacking changed, do you think?
But I'm definitely more careful in, like, and my daughter, early on when we really started to backpack, and it was every year. I mean, we would do 1 or 2 big backpacks, like 4 or 5 days, big days, big mountains, lots of climbing, um, and a lot of off trail. I'm not as comfortable, I mean, in sketchy situations. I mean, just putting myself like when I create my own trips, I tend to be like, even though I'm going to a wilderness area, I do a lot more, like, because I didn't do research before, I do a lot of research of like almost walking the trail before I even get there, like studying the maps, looking at it, reading like what other people have said. There's a lot of beautiful wilderness areas in West Virginia that I visit frequently, and I just found that the more I know, the more information I gather about the place, the better equipped I am for all whatever it throws at me. I feel like I'll be ready. And I think as I've gotten older, I've just like made sure my gear, I know what I'm doing when I pack. I don't overpack. I try not to overpack. Everything is as light as it could possibly be, even though my daughter gets really upset with me because I bring a chair. But I'm like, I have a Helinox. I am telling you,
I got two of them.
man, don't think I could do it. My knee is just like a little bit of a problem, and when I get to camp after, 10 or 12, 14, 15 miles, it's like, "No way, I wanna be sitting on the ground."
Do
I
you
want
have the high back or the normal?
I have, mine is the normal, the little it's like a
Oh,
1-pound Helinox.
Kathy, get that high back Helinox.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Oh,
she cannot believe I bring it, but, I tried it was funny, the 4 women, we call ourselves the Mountain Mamas, and we were, 2 of them are not really wanting to backpack anymore. They're a little older than I am and have few more health issues, and so they aren't wanting to backpack, but the last couple we did together, they thought, "Well, we'll just leave our chairs behind, we won't bring a chair," and I'm like, I'm bringing a chair." Well, they confiscated my chair the whole trip because they wanted to use the chair. So I'm like, "No, I have backpacked my friend Andy that I took the trip to Iceland with. He's really, minimalist, and he has a chair that sits on the ground, and he's cut everything off of it. I mean, he measures everything, and when he saw my chair, he's like, "Oh, I can't believe you brought that chair."
hey, this is directly to Anastasia. Hike your own hike.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's right. Well, and then, there's some like I've read a lot of stuff. This we in book club we did Glenn Pesky's book, Take More or Take Less, Do More, and there were some great ideas, but it wasn't my kind of hike. It was, I'm not gonna hike until and have my dinner in my crotch to warm it up and then eat while I'm walking.
No.
I'll end up face planning doing stuff like that. So, you gotta do your own hike. You gotta do your I like to be in camp, and I like to sit and chat with the person I'm with and have a nice, quiet, calm meal, have time to unwind before I love my tent, I love that little bubble. I like getting in and just everything about it.
And you think about it, if you bring a camp chair, there's a comfort to it that I think outweighs the 16 ounces, meaning that my body's resting in a
Mhm.
maybe a more natural way than just sitting crisscross applesauce, Indian style, whatever we call it these days, that's a benefit. And to me, it pays off. And also like getting your sleep system just, yeah, I have a sleep pad. It's probably a little bit heavier than what I would normally take, but I sleep good. I even take a
Exactly.
pillow,
Oh, I do.
and yeah, so we can backpack together.
Yeah, those are the things that, I'm not gonna compromise on, because if you don't sleep comfortably for multiple days, if it's a longer trip, you'll pay the price. You'll be tired, you'll be, careless with my feet at the end of the day tend to, like, drag, and I'll have
Yeah,
more opportunities to trip. So,
yeah,
sleeping well is, one of those things, and I have, like, a little pillow, and I have, everything I need to be comfortable, but it's still relatively light. Like, I'm still, even when I have to carry a lot of water, my base weight is fairly light.
if you look now, how and you're planning a trip, how important is pacing yourself and listening to your body versus what it used to be?
Because I live so close to the Appalachian Trail, and I spend a lot of time talking to AT hikers that, it's no big deal for them to put 20 miles, 25 miles in a day. I don't think at I mean, I might be able to do that once in a while, but as a sustained, way to hike, I don't think that's manageable. I just don't think
Yeah,
that's a healthy thing for me. And I'm not sure, some of them, like, by the end of their height, because of the food they're eating and just the wear and tear on their body, aren't necessarily that healthy when they end their hike.
yeah,
So I don't wanna put myself in that kind of position at my age. You know, I I'm careful because I wanna feel good, and I wanna
yeah,
leave the trip not diminished, but feeling like I can't wait to come back. I always want that feeling, I mean, there are gonna be occasions when you have to leave a trip because there's, like, an ice storm, and or your equipment broke down, and
yeah,
you have to make, like, "This is dumb. I can't stay out here. I don't have," something's not working. But, but other than that, I think I always wanna be set up, and I always tell my friends this, I wanna be set up for success, and that means
yeah,
I've done my research, I've done my homework, I've spent the time to lay everything out and think about everything I'm bringing, and in general, I just always have a wonderful time. Like, I go into it thinking I'm gonna have a good time, and I always have a good time, even when it's
yeah.
sort of a crappy trip.
I haven't done a lot of crazy stuff like Anastasia, but in Texas, I've done a lot of the crazy stuff that you can do in Texas. I remember, like, you're just not very happy heading to the car. You've been out bushwhacking, you got thorns in your legs, bleeding all over the place for 13 hours. And I'm like, I'm never doing this again. And then like 3 days later, you're like, hey, when are we going to do that again? Or, so yeah, it's funny how quickly we forget.
That sounds exactly, that's my experience. Like, soon as I finish, even though it was like, "Oh my god, I just barely made it through 5 days," I'm like, "Okay, what am I gonna do? What's next?" And it's fun. I mean, I love it.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting question. So, do you train or prepare differently for trips now, or or like maybe that you day hike so much that you're are all always kind of in that fitness that you need for certain trips?
I do see people that are training and they're, like, wearing a backpack out training. I have never done that. I've and but m I mean, but I will say, by nature, I'm a pretty compulsive person, so I get up every morning. I wake up, between 5:30 and 6, and I'm usually out, on the trail. I used to run, like, 6 to 10 miles a day, and now I'm walking, and I walk 6 to 8 miles every day. 7 days a week. Days I'm hiking, I'll go and do a hike. Um, it's relatively easy for me to do like a 15-mile, 17, 18-mile day. I doesn't I think I've just have like a general, like, I've just kept myself in pretty good shape as far as that hiking goes. So I feel fortunate, but I've never trained with weight. I do see people if you were gonna do mountaineering, I think it might be important, but I think for what I do and what I plan like, for my future backpacking trips, I think I'm not really concerned about that. I've never gotten on the trail and felt like, "Oh my gosh, this is too heavy, I'm not gonna make it."
No. Let's say maybe to people that aren't hiker and backpackers, what do you think something that people assume about this lifestyle that we have for people that are later on in life that's not true?
I think that you can start I think you don't have to start with a 20-mile hike, that even a short hike is a good hike. I was just in Sedona, and I know it's like, everybody just hikes 2 miles, like, to whatever the lookout like, whatever the attraction is, and we were putting together all these trails to make a 14 or 15-mile day because that's what we like. But
No.
I I would say there hiking takes all different shapes. It could be on the towpath of the C&O Canal. I started a woman who was struggling with cancer and was using a walker, and I said, "Well, how would it be with using poles?" Because she said, "I really wanna get out there, but, I don't want people to think, like I have a walker." She got some hiking poles, and she came out, and even she started at a mile, and then she worked up to 2 miles, and she said, that it never she never felt better, and she had lived in the town of Williamsport her whole life, as a child, had never, ever hiked on the towpath, and she said it just never was something that she thought of, that was something she would do. And I just think that exposure I don't know if you're familiar with the book, Forest Bathing, the concept of
Mm-mm.
forest bathing. So it's a Japanese, it's a book, and it was given to me, and it's the concept of good health, mental and physical good health through exposure to forests and being outdoors. And in a lot of Japanese businesses in Japan, they that's a requirement that people spend half an hour a day just being outdoors, being in nature. And I think that, reading that book really like took me I thought a lot about that and how healthy mental health is so connected to the outdoors. And I know
Yeah.
when I'm having like a day where I'm feeling like, what's going on? I'm just like, wah, wah, like just down. I don't know what it is. Even 10 minutes of being outside, taking a walk can turn it around. So for people that are older, when you seem to feel, when your world gets sort of small, I mean, it just starts to shrink a little bit. I think walking and being able to get outdoors is so important to like everything, mental health, physical health. I just think it's just integral to feeling good in your later years.
So, how do you mentally approach longer or tougher trips that you plan now?
I like them so much. I like the longer trips. I think the harder trips are one day. I think that's all that work, and then you just like it's overnight, and I'm like, oh man, I should have planned it to be out longer. When it's the I have the longest trip like within the last couple of years was 11 days, and
Wow.
I didn't struggle with that at all. I mean, that seems short to me. I mean, it just didn't seem that long. So I guess I'm just sort of like I like I like being in my tent. So the longer I'm out, the better I usually feel. Like and it's like I actually feel like every day just gets better and better. I'm not sure that's everybody feels that way, but maybe it's just circumstances that I happen to get good weather and, you're with
Yeah.
being with the right person too can make a difference. I know that maybe not the politically correct thing to say, but when you've backpacked a lot with different people or with a group, I am just always amazed at, like different personalities can really influence a trip. Like people who are really negative and just
Yep.
not happy to be out there can sort of influence the whole group. So as I've gotten older, you sort of know the people. I'm sure you have a hiking partner when you know
Yes,
people
ma'am.
that you just click with. even when it's not, this is like not excluding family, like my daughter, which I could go on a hiking trip with her and her husband, and it is just magic. Like it's just, I always enjoy myself. And
Yeah.
they're just so kind, and they watch out for me when they see that we're dropping down into like a crazy, they're like, "Oh, maybe we should take your bag." Like, "Oh, we didn't plan this." But, like
Mm,
when you're with other people and you just sort of like understand each other, and that makes a huge difference. So finding the right people to hike with, is even day hiking with people that are sort of on the same page, is really fun.
yeah. Nice. So, what keeps you confident on the trail? And so I can just listen to you and I could tell you have a confidence about, like when we're talking about the backpacking and stuff. So yeah, I mean, like as you get older, as I get older, like what do you think the secret is?
Well, I think like just daily paying attention to like doing things like not sitting, like, not sitting all the time, but movement is important, and I do, I use light weights, I do train with weights, at least usually when I'm at home 3 to 4 days a week. I think that's really important because my joints are not what they used to be, and I think keeping the muscles around the joints healthy is super important, and paying attention, like, I'm real sensitive, I can tell when I'm eating a lot of crap and I won't feel nearly as good. Not that I don't
Yeah.
enjoy, like, good sweet stuff, but, it doesn't always make me feel great. But, the just doing that as you get older, um, helps, like, I do feel, like, physically, more confident. I mean, I will say, I started at 52 doing this, um, and I'm now gonna be 70, and I f I feel strong. I still feel strong. Do I sometimes feel like, am I nuts to be, doing this? I maybe a little doubt crops in every so often, like questioning, how long am I gonna be able to do this? But, I don't linger on that. I linger on, like, right now, I feel amazing, and that's where I'm gonna stay. And I deal with, whatever issues I'm gonna have pop up, I'll deal with them then, but I'm not gonna bring them in ahead of time. I'm not gonna start thinking about them ahead of time, because I feel like then I set myself up for doubt, and I don't usually when I start out, I do not have a lot of doubt. I'm like, "Nope, this is gonna be a great trip."
Yeah, and when what you just said, you were, thinking about how long you'll be able to do this.
Mhm.
I had the hiking rep on the podcast, and he's a gentleman out of California. He hiked the PCT. He was just he's in his he's got to be in his 70s, I think. And he just tried to do the AT, but then had to leave the trail to go to grandkids graduations, and he came back and then realized he was too far behind the bubble. So I had him on. I've been following him for a while and his content. He's YouTube stuff, and he was talking about what it means to hike and backpack at, being our age, older. And so I was preparing the, the questions and thinking about them. And the last section was, it's exactly what you just said. Like, at what point will I no longer be able to do this? And for you, for him, for me, this is such a massive part of our life,
Mhm.
that we enjoy. Not all of our life, we have probably other interests and stuff, but it's a big part. And I started tearing up, like I'm typing the questions out for him, like that I was going to ask him, like, and it hit me that I have that kind of thought when I leave the Guads, like, is this the last time that I'm gonna be here? Because I don't know the future and stuff like that. So it's yeah, it's something that I think over time that we have to come to terms with and what that's gonna look like. And yeah, there will be a day that I leave the Guads, and hopefully it's on my own terms. That
Mhm.
yes, this is it. This is it. I'll this will be the last time. Or I always tell Leah, I go, hopefully that is die on the trail and, you I already told her where to put my ashes on the Permian Reef Trail, so we're all in alignment on that. So
I think I left the same message. I was like, cremate me and throw me on Glacier Peak. I'll be good.
yep,
It's all
yep,
good.
yep, absolutely. So now, what does a good day on trail look like for you?
I love getting up early. I'm like a pretty early riser, and I'm a quick that could be really annoying for people. I'm quick packer upper, and I'll have my other friends go like, there's a group of us called the Mountain Mamas, and they're like, "Ah, she's already packed up." But I can get up really early, but I've got my Jetboil going, I've got coffee. So, coffee is, like, very important to me on the trail,
Yep.
and then I don't even get out of my tent before I pack everything in. That's my routine. I wake up, I just, pull out the stopper of my mat, roll up my backpack, roll up my pad, and then I crawl out, fix coffee, and then start breaking my tent down, and I'm good to go.
I got something for you real quick. Hold
Yeah.
on. This is not a paid advertisement, but I just had Angry Pica on, and they just launched their instant coffee.
Oh, and it's so small.
Yes, and I just got in contact with, and they were like, "Oh, we'll send you some coffee," and I'm like, "No, I'll pay for coffee. I'm not gonna let you send me something." But Bear Box Brew,
Oh.
and so this coffee is kind of cool. Um, it's a steeper, like a tea bag of coffee.
Oh, okay. I have used those before. Oh, wow. Oh, that's so you're a coffee person. That's good to know.
Let me tell you, if we ever backpack, chairs, coffee, early
Coffee.
risers, yeah, we're in alignment.
Yeah, and then, and the perfect day is just there were so many days like that when we were on the Centennial Trail. It was just I mean, not that all the campsites are, like, epic, they're not. It's sorta hard to find, and actually, you know, I just did last year, I did it's from, or it's called the Coast to Coast, the Sea to Sea Trail, which is from Corvallis to the coast in Oregon, and man, that trail is rough because 'cause you're on logging roads and gravel has been laid down. We broke stakes, we were, like, cursing like you wouldn't believe. I mean, it was not pretty because we couldn't set our tents up, but you know what? Every
Oh,
single
man.
day, we would just go, "Oh my god, this is spectacular." And when you
Yep,
hit the ocean, you're just like, "Okay, so what if we broke our stakes and we were yelling and screaming and hiking way too many miles to find a campsite?" Um,
yep.
but that's sort of the perfect it's just at the end, 3 or 4, 5 o'clock, you're setting up your tent. That's a perfect day. So you have a couple of hours before the sun goes down to just sit and, you know, chill, and even we always walk around, like, my friends and I will set up our tents, eat dinner, and then we'll take another little walk. Not like we
Nice.
didn't walk enough.
Yep, yep. Oh, yeah, we've done that plenty of times. And that wraps up another exciting episode of the Trailblazing Texas podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode today, and stay tuned for our next episode where we will pick back up where we left off and guarantee to uncover many more hiking gems and share many more tips to enhance your experience on the trail. Until then, happy trails and happy hiking.